there are many regions in Russia where people hate Russia and Moscow. In some places, like the Caucasus, this hatred is open, while in others, like Tatarstan, it's quietly expressed in kitchens. But the champion in hatred toward Russian occupiers is the Republic of Tuva. Tuva is a very rich region in the southern part of Siberia, on the border with Mongolia. As is often the case in Russia, it's only rich on geographical maps and in geologists' reports. In reality, Tuva is probably the most depressed region in the so-called empire. According to data from Rosstat, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Finance, the proportion of the population living below the poverty line in Tuva is a shocking 34%. About 7% of Tuvans live below the extreme poverty line. That is, their income is less than half of the subsistence minimum. People are literally undernourished.
Unfortunately, demographic growth has nothing to do with the well-being of the population, whose income, according to official statistics, is among the lowest in the country. And just a little way from the tidy city center, you can easily see a completely different Kizil, impoverished, dirty, and frightening.
In 100 years of occupation, Russia hasn't even bothered to build a railway to Tuva. Today, to get from Moscow to Kizil, you have to repeat the feat of Phileas Fogg from Around the World in 80 Days, because there are no trains going there and no direct flights.
There have never been any railways here. Planes come here only when they can, and it's actually much easier to reach Tuva by car from Mongolia than from neighboring Russian regions.
In the capital of the Republic, Kizil, there are wooden shacks right in the city center. And the most profitable occupation for the local population is collecting cannabis. Tuva is the leader in Russia for drug trafficking.
What can I say? Even the head of the Republic's own brother did time for a large batch of hashish, 2.5 kilograms. He was arrested in Krasnoyarsk by the FSB. They put him in prison.
In Tuva, there is a true monument to Putinism, and it was personally installed by Putin himself. In 2011, the pale cigarette butt ceremoniously drove in the first spike and announced the start of railway construction. For show, they even laid down 10 meters of rails. They planned to build 400 kilometers, but 15 years later, not a single centimeter has been completed.
When they started working, when the construction began, I thought they would build everything. They had already started, built everything, laid everything out, the road here. They made the road and laid the rails. I thought that was it, they'd start building. But somehow the work just stopped. Then they took everything apart and left for some reason.
The project is estimated at 200 billion rubles. But that didn't stop them in 2020 from claiming that the road wasn't being built because there wasn't enough money.
There just isn't any money. Hang in there, all the best to you, good mood, good health.
There is another living monument to Putinism in Tuva wedding generalissimo. A cardboard marshal, a reindeer herder, a shaman, and simply a Tuvan degenerate.
A serious parade.
Shoigu is a prime example of a true mankurt and collaborator, one of those who plunders and destroys his own people.
We will win.
But Tuva wasn't always like this. It is the very last region that was annexed to Russia. Until the 20th century, Tuva was under the influence of China, but after China weakened, Moscow began a creeping occupation. Nothing changed with the arrival of the Bolsheviks. The Russians kept sticking their drunken noses into a foreign country. In 1921, the Tuvan People's Republic was proclaimed, which was completely subordinate to the USSR. Doesn't this remind you of anything?
Residents of Donetsk, throats.
The leaders of the self-proclaimed DPR held a mass rally in Donetsk, timed to the 5th anniversary of the start of the struggle for separation from Ukraine.
But even formal independence didn't last long. In 1944, the mustachioed dictator annexed Tuva. Moreover, it wasn't made the 16th Soviet Republic, but was instead forced into becoming part of Russia. And this marked the beginning of many years of interethnic hostility, which continues to this day. The Tuvans did not accept the arrival of the occupiers and have successfully resisted them. Tuva is the only Russian region where forced assimilation has failed. In Tuva, the majority of the population are Tuvans, and most people speak the Tuvan language.
In Tuva, for example, 88% of the population are Tuvans. It's essentially a mono-ethnic republic. That's right. This isn't the case in either Kalmykia or Buryatia, because there the main population, or rather the majority, are Russians. That's right. And here most people speak Tuvan, and usually not always speak Russian well, often with an accent.
Moscow made a great effort to destroy Tuvan's self-identity and self-governance. When Putin came to power, Tuva was stripped of all the attributes of statehood. In 2001, a new constitution was imposed, which no longer mentions sovereignty. The new law gives equal rights to the Russian and Tuvan languages, even though almost no one there actually speaks Russian. The 2001 constitution also abolished the position of President of the Republic. And in 2010, as a result of a Kremlin-rigged referendum, the article on local citizenship was completely removed.
The metropolis tells us, you are separatists. This is you separatists. But that's a colonial concept. I mean, why, for example, why is it that people's desire to live in their own country is called separatism? It's a struggle for independence.
Listen, I think it's actually deeper than that. It's not about living in your own country, but on your own territory, on your own land, in the place where you had your home, where your parents, your grandparents were born, where your whole life takes place, being able to speak your own language, to preserve your culture, your way of life.
In Tuva, they literally tested out the referendum scheme that was later used in Crimea and Donbass.
Because of this, I'm actually in a really good mood today, because Russia should be a united country, and I believe the referendums held in these 4 territories were necessary and timely. And I support both the President of the Russian Federation and the Russian Federation's army.
Naturally, Russians are not welcome in Tuva. It's not the best region to open a Shi restaurant. Separatist and anti-Russian sentiments forced Yemelya to pack up his samovars and flee Tuva in terror. If at the end of the 80s the Russian-speaking population here made up 33%, now it's almost half that, about 18%. The outflow of Russians from the region continues to this day.
There is an opinion that Tuvans deliberately hire only their own people for good positions, leaving Slavs with only a few jobs for the sake of statistics. At the same time, many Tuvans, especially those who did not grow up in Kizil, don't even speak Russian.
There are regularly inscriptions on the fence of the Orthodox Church under construction that say, "Russians, get out!" During the presidential elections, leaflets were distributed throughout the Republic saying, "Russians are our enemies." It has gotten to the point where the Russians who have moved here are afraid to go out at night because the locals periodically stage demonstrative intimidation actions.
The Union of Russian-speaking Citizens of Tuva, called Rossiane, appealed to President Vladimir Putin with a complaint about the discrimination against the Russian-speaking population in the Republic. It's just that there's this stumbling block different nationalities, that's all.
In Tuva, there was even a committee for the homeless that settled Tuvans in apartments abandoned by Russians. In other words, the exodus of the Laptenigae is massive.
It's scary, very scary. We don't know what it is. If we truly knew what it was, we certainly do not actually know what it is.
The movement for independence from Mordor has always been strong in Tuva. In October 1989, the People's Front of Tuva emerged, becoming the main organization of the Tuvan national movement in the final years of the Soviet Union. At the beginning of 1993, the People's Party of Sovereign Tuva was established. That same year, they succeeded in including a declarative proclamation of the Republic of Tuva's right to secede from Russia in the constitution.
Someone is always laying claim to the Tuvans. The Mongols lay claim to us, the Turks lay claim to us, and so do the Russians.
What about China? On some maps, China is marked.
For example, yes. And people are constantly laying claim to us. And I have this reaction like, stop, let me identify myself as Tuvan and not just don't lump me together with some larger group.
But gradually, Moscow managed to bribe and intimidate the local elites, and the national liberation movement quieted down in the 2000s and 2010s. But ordinary people in Tuva did not fall silent. Unlike Russians, they have always defended their rights.
According to local residents, heavy machinery was actively transported across the bridge over the river. When they found out about this, The people of Chediko formed a human shield to prevent the gold miners from entering the district.
After Russia's attack on Ukraine in 2014, the question of independence began to resurface in Tuva, because Moscow itself gave the green light with its actions.
Returning to their native and familiar harbor, the ships finally arrived home.
After the full-scale invasion, the national movement, protests, and separatist sentiments only grew stronger. In 2022, the mobilization for the war against Ukraine sparked anti-Russian sentiment among the Tuvans. Tuva became one of the regions that suffered the most in the war against Ukraine. Tuva is one of the leaders among Russian regions in terms of the number of people mobilized relative to its population. Plus, due to extreme poverty, many voluntarily sign a contract with death, because Tuvan men have virtually no other way to earn a living.
That's how hard it is, that's how we live. It's the same with those groceries are brought in by boat. And now there's no one there at all. Only pensioners are left, there are no young people there anymore. And you have to work shifts, but who has a shift job? I'm already too old. I don't like working shifts.
More than 1% of all Tuvan men aged 20 to 55 have died in the war in Ukraine. The mortality rate in Tuva is almost 5 times higher than the Russian average. For a people of 300,000, this is a demographic catastrophe. Moscow uses the national republics as a resource base for the war, disregarding the lives of the local population.
I think Tuva, in principle, only has a future if it gains independence. Tuva as a state and Tuvans as a people only have a future if they are independent. If independence cannot be achieved, then I believe we have no future.
In Tuva, dissatisfaction with the war is gradually growing, especially among the families of those who have died. In 2022 and 2023, Tuvan activists appealed to the UN, asking for an investigation into the discriminatory mobilization in Russia, but to no avail. The UN, as we all know, is an organization that's not worth a damn, especially since it doesn't even have any balls. The only chance for the Tuvans to survive is independence from the Russian pseudo-empire. The Tuvans have everything they need to become a successful, prosperous country. A united, patriotic people and incredibly rich land.
We're not poor because it's not because we're poor. In fact, we're insanely rich. All our republics are very rich, both in people and in all other resources. And realizing that, by the way, I think this is important, realizing that in fact we are very rich.
Yes.
And to understand this dissonance you feel when you walk out onto the streets of your hometown and realize, if we are so rich, why do we live like this?
Tuva will once again become truly free, and the oppressive pseudo-empire will inevitably collapse completely, once and for all, much like manure falling from under a horse.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.